Have you ever stared up at the night sky and asked yourself, where did all of this come from? The stars, the galaxies, the Earth, us. For centuries, people answered that question with one word: God. But then came science. And with it, the idea that maybe, just maybe, we didn't need God to explain where we came from. And at the center of that idea is one theory: evolution. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection transformed our understanding of life on Earth. It showed how simple forms of life could gradually become more complex over time, no designer necessary. No divine intervention required. For many, that was liberating. For others, it was terrifying. And so the battle began. Science versus religion, evolution versus God. But what if this whole debate is based on a misunderstanding? What if evolution isn't the enemy of faith, but a deeper invitation to explore the mystery of creation? In this video, we're going to dive into the heart of one of the biggest questions of our time. Can the theory of evolution disprove the existence of God? We'll look at what evolution actually says, and what it doesn't. Why some people think evolution makes God unnecessary. What evolution can't explain. And why belief in God still matters, even in a scientific age. By the end, you might not just have an answer. You might have a new way of looking at the universe itself. Let's begin. Part 2: What is evolution? Before we jump into whether evolution disproves God, let's make sure we understand what evolution really is. Most people have heard of Charles Darwin. In 1859, he published a book called On the Origin of Species. In it, he proposed a simple but powerful idea. Species change over time, and they do it through a process called natural selection. Let's break that down. Imagine a population of birds living on an island. Some have slightly longer beaks. Some have slightly shorter ones. One year, there's a drought, and only certain flowers with deep nectar survive. Birds with longer beaks can reach the nectar. The others can't. So the long-beaked birds are more likely to survive and have babies. Those babies also have long beaks. Over many generations, the whole bird population starts to shift toward longer beaks. That's evolution by natural selection in action. It's not guided by intelligence. It's not planned. It's just variation, struggle, and survival. This process, repeated over millions of years, can lead to incredible complexity. Simple single-celled organisms evolve into multicellular life. Fish become amphibians. Apes become humans. That's the theory. And over the last 160 years, it's been supported by mountains of evidence. The fossil record shows gradual transitions between species. DNA reveals how closely related all living things are. We've even observed evolution happening in real time, bacteria developing resistance to antibiotics. For example, today, evolution is considered one of the most well-established theories in all of science. But here's the key point. Evolution is a scientific theory about how life changes over time. It does not claim to answer why life exists in the first place. Let me say that again. Evolution explains the process, not the purpose. Yet many people have taken it much further, suggesting that if evolution is true, then God must be false. Let's explore that next. Part 3: Why some people think evolution disproves God. So why do some people believe that evolution disproves the existence of God? It's not necessarily because of Darwin himself. In fact, Charles Darwin never said, God doesn't exist. He was cautious. By the end of his life, he described himself as agnostic, not atheist. But over time, some thinkers, especially in the 20th century, began using evolution as a weapon against religion. Thinkers like Richard Dawkins, who famously said, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Or Daniel Dennett, who called evolution a universal acid that eats through all traditional beliefs. The argument goes something like this. We used to think God created everything. But now we know life can evolve by itself. So, no need for God. This idea became very popular in academic and cultural circles. And it's easy to see why. Before evolution, the complexity of life seemed to demand a designer. Just look at the eye, or the brain, or DNA. How could something so intricate arise by chance? Then evolution came along and said, it didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, step by step, through small changes, over millions of years. That was revolutionary, and for some, it felt like the final nail in God's coffin. But here's the problem. This line of thinking confuses scientific explanation with philosophical conclusion. It's like saying, I understand how gravity works, so I don't need to believe that the universe has a creator. Or, once I learn how bread is made, I no longer need a baker. Do you see the leap? Evolution may explain how life developed, but that doesn't mean it explains why life exists at all. In other words, just because we've discovered a mechanism doesn't mean we've eliminated the need for a mind behind it. You can believe in evolution and still believe in God. But to really see why, we have to dig deeper into what evolution can and can't actually tell us. Part 4: The Philosophical Limits of Science. Science is powerful. It's given us vaccines, satellites, smartphones, and space telescopes. It helps us understand black holes, genetics, and subatomic particles. But science, by its very nature, has limits. It can tell us what something is made of, how it works, how it changes over time. But it cannot answer why anything exists at all. What purpose, if any, lies behind it, whether something is morally right or wrong. These are philosophical or theological questions, not scientific ones. Let's take an example. Imagine you're holding a book. Science can tell you the book is made of paper, ink, glue, and maybe thread. The molecules in the paper are made of atoms. The atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But can science tell you why the book was written? Can it explain the meaning of the story? No. To do that, you need to talk to the author. Now think about the universe. Science can explain a lot about how the universe functions, but it can't tell us why the universe exists, or whether there's an author behind it. In the same way, evolution can describe how life unfolds, but not why there is life at all, or what life ultimately means. Here's another example. Science can tell you the chemical composition of a rose, but it can't tell you why it's beautiful, or why we feel awe when we look at a sunset, or why we love. These questions point beyond science. So when someone says, evolution disproves God, they're stepping outside the bounds of science and making a philosophical claim. One that's not backed by evolutionary biology, but by personal belief. You see, even if we accept that life evolved naturally, that doesn't rule out the idea of a creator who designed the very laws that allow evolution to happen. In fact, for many people, the existence of order and rationality in nature is not evidence against God, but evidence for Him. Part 5: What evolution can't explain. Let's go even further. Let's talk about what evolution cannot explain. Even in principle, there are at least 5 major questions that evolution leaves unanswered. 1. The origin of life. Evolution explains how life changes, but it does not explain how life began. The process of natural selection requires something to select from, that is, life must already exist. So where did the first living cell come from? That's a different field of study, abiogenesis. And while there are many hypotheses, no theory has fully explained how life spontaneously emerged from non-life. 2. The fine-tuning of the universe. Why does the universe have the exact physical constants needed for life to exist? If gravity were slightly stronger or weaker, stars couldn't form. If the strong nuclear force were off by a fraction, atoms wouldn't hold together. If the cosmological constant were slightly different, the universe would expand too fast or collapse on itself. Evolution has nothing to say about this, but many philosophers and scientists see this as pointing toward a designer. 3. Consciousness. We are not just biological machines. We think, we feel, we dream, we wonder. No one, not even the most advanced neuroscientist, can fully explain how subjective experience arises from brain matter. Evolution might explain how brains developed, but it does not explain why there is a mind behind the brain. 4. Morality. Why do we believe some things are good and others are evil? Yes, evolution may encourage cooperation because it helps survival. But why should we care about justice, compassion, or the value of a human life, especially if it's not useful? If morality is just a biological byproduct, then there is no real, right, or wrong. only what's useful. But we know in our hearts that some things are truly good, and others are truly evil. That moral reality points beyond biology. 5. Meaning. Perhaps the deepest question of all. What is the meaning of life? Evolution can tell us how humans came to be. It cannot tell us why we are here. But humans long for meaning. We ask questions that no other species does. We build cathedrals. We write poetry. We seek transcendence. Why? Because we are more than matter. And our hunger for meaning points toward a higher source. Part 6. Scientists who believe in God. Let's pause for a moment and ask, is it possible to be a world-class scientist and still believe in God? The answer is absolutely. In fact, many of the greatest minds in science, both past and present, believed in a creator. Let's look at just a few. Isaac Newton, one of the fathers of modern physics. He discovered the laws of motion and gravity. But he also wrote more about God and theology than he did about science. Newton saw science as a way to understand the mind of the Creator. Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics. His work laid the foundation for how we understand inheritance today. What many people don't know. He was a Catholic monk. Georges Lemaitre. He was the first scientist to propose what we now call the Big Bang theory. He described the beginning of the universe as a cosmic egg exploding at the moment of creation. Lemaitre, also a Catholic priest. Francis Collins, one of the leading geneticists of our time. He led the Human Genome Project, the effort to map all the genes in human DNA. Collins is a devout Christian. In fact, he wrote a book called The Language of God, where he describes how studying DNA deepened his belief in a creator. He writes, "For me, the experience of sequencing the human genome and uncovering this most remarkable of all texts was both a scientific and a spiritual journey." So, clearly, belief in God is not incompatible with science. It's not even incompatible with evolution. In fact, many scientists believe that God created the universe with laws, and that evolution is simply the unfolding of those laws over time. To them, evolution doesn't deny God, it reveals him. But what about religion? How do religious traditions view evolution? Let's explore that next. Part 7. What religious thinkers say about evolution. Approximately 1.200 words. Contrary to popular belief, not all religious people reject evolution. Let's start with the Catholic Church. The Catholic view. The Catholic Church has never officially rejected the theory of evolution. In fact, several popes have affirmed that evolution and belief in God are not in conflict. Pope Pius XII, in 1950, said that there is no opposition between evolution and the doctrine of the faith, so long as God is acknowledged as the origin of the human soul. Pope John Paul II later added that evolution is more than a hypothesis, and has been widely supported by scientific evidence. Pope Benedict XVI emphasized that science and faith are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. And Pope Francis said, evolution in nature is not inconsistent with the notion of creation, because evolution requires the creation of beings that evolve. In other words, God could very well have used evolution as his method of creation. Other Christian denominations. Many Protestant denominations also accept evolution. Groups like the Anglican Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the United Methodist Church, have all stated that evolution and faith in God can coexist. Judaism. In Judaism, many rabbis and scholars accept evolution. They view the Genesis account of creation not as a literal scientific text, but as a spiritual narrative about the relationship between God and the world. Islam. Islamic views on evolution vary. Some Muslim scholars accept aspects of evolution, especially for animals. There's more debate about human evolution, particularly the soul and the uniqueness of humans as creations of God. The key insight? In all these traditions, the key distinction is this. Evolution may describe the how, but God answers the why. Just because life has a natural mechanism doesn't mean it lacks a divine author. Now let's bring all this together. Part 8. God and evolution. Enemies or partners? We've now reached a pivotal point. We've seen that evolution is a scientific explanation of biological change, that it doesn't explain where life, consciousness, or morality come from, That many scientists and religious thinkers see no contradiction between evolution and God. So why the hostility? Why do so many people still treat God and evolution as mutually exclusive? The answer may lie in worldviews. For some atheists, evolution becomes more than science, it becomes a philosophy. A way of saying, nature is all there is. That's naturalism, the belief that everything can be explained by natural causes alone. But that belief itself isn't scientific. It's philosophical. You can't prove that only natural things exist. So when people say, evolution proves there's no God, what they really mean is, I've already decided there is no God, and evolution fits that view. But that's not neutral science. That's a worldview, just like religion. And here's the surprising thing. You don't have to choose between God or evolution. You can believe that God created the universe, that He designed laws of physics and biology, and that those laws naturally led to the emergence of life through evolution. In this view, evolution is not an enemy of faith. It's part of the mystery of creation. It's the unfolding of a divine plan, written not just in sacred texts, but in the DNA of every living thing. Part 9: The question behind the question. Let's return to the original question. Can the theory of evolution disprove the existence of God? By now, the answer should be clear. No. But maybe the better question is, why are we asking this question in the first place? For some, it's because they want certainty. They want science to tell them whether belief is rational. For others, it's because they've been told that faith and science are enemies. But here's the truth. Faith and science are not enemies. They are partners in the search for truth. Science explores how the world works. Faith explores why the world exists. Science gives us facts. Faith gives us meaning. You need both. You can admire the beauty of evolution and still believe that behind it is the hand of a loving creator. You can study DNA and still believe that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. You can look at the stars and still whisper, the heavens declare the glory of God. Part 10: Final conclusion. Why God still matters. Let's be honest. The question of God's existence is not just about biology. It's about everything. If there is no God, then life has no ultimate meaning. We are just atoms in motion, accidents of time and chance. But if there is a God, then everything changes. We are not accidents. We are intended. Life is not random. It is sacred. The universe is not silent. It is singing. And even if we evolved from dust, we carry within us the breath of the divine. So no, evolution does not disprove God. In fact, for many, it makes God even more incredible. A God who doesn't need to tinker with every detail, but who can design a world with the freedom to grow and evolve. A God who gives His creation the gift of unfolding beauty and possibility. A God who is both the author of Scripture and the author of nature. So as you walk through this world, as you marvel at the trees, the oceans, the birds, the stars, know this: you are part of a story far greater than evolution. You are part of a story written by love, shaped by truth, and destined for eternity. Thank you for watching.